This is a Dynamite Network podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters and stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm his twin brother, Johnny DC.
And in this episode, we are going to review the latest DC film's release, Blue Beetle. I thought it was fine. Jonathan apparently thinks it was the greatest movie ever made, and we've been arguing about it pretty much for the past few hours.
I feel like that's a stretch, but I did really enjoy the film, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk all about it later on this episode. Before that, we're going to break down the comic book movie news that came out this past week, of which there was none, or at least none worth talking about. Like, we learned that Taika Waititi made some comments about what he would do for a Thor 5 movie, but God, no, they better not let him direct another Thor film.
Yeah, we also saw that David Ayer shared some AI art on social media that he's claiming is concept art for his Suicide Squad film. He's just really desperate to release the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. And I'm like,
Yeah, who cares? What we're going to end up doing is talking about a game that Jonathan and I developed, a card game, deck building card game called Chronicle AI. Hopefully you guys tune into that because we think it's pretty cool. But we're biased. But trust us.
As always, we list our segment times in our episode description, so feel free to check out the show notes if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic.
As our listeners may know, our duel simulator is so advanced that it's gained sentience and has named itself the artificial life form for running extensive duels, just a rather very intelligent simulator 9000 or Alfred Jarvis 9000. Here's a quick message for our listeners, so listen up.
Why, hello there. Do you love listening and chatting about Marvel and DC? Then become a part of the Dynamic Duel community on Patreon, where you can choose from 3 tiers. The Dynamic 2.0 tier lets you listen to this podcast without ads and gives you access to its Discord chat group, where you can chat with Johnny DC and Marvelous Joe. The Fantastic 4 tier gives you that and more with 2 bonus episodes each month, including bloopers and top 10 shows where Johnny and Joe count down your favourite Marvel and DC subjects. The X-Force tier makes you an executive producer of Dynamic Duel, where every month you help the host choose what to review and who to fight against each other. And finally, the Dynamite Podcast Network tier allows aspiring podcasters to create their own battle-focused show using this Monte Carlo simulator. Johnny and Joe will help you develop your show, provide graphic support and consultation, and get you simulation results to announce on your show. Pitch the twins your show via email at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by reaching out to them on social media. Check it out at patreon.com/dynamicduel. Pip pip cheerio.
Thanks, AJ9K, and thanks to everyone who supports the podcast. Be sure to tune into the Max Destruction podcast to witness the bare-knuckle brawls of the greatest action stars across film and television. This week, on Wednesday, August 23rd, you can learn who would win in a fight between Lara Croft from Tomb Raider and Lilu from The Fifth Element.
Yeah, also be sure to tune into Senjo World, a new battle podcast featuring your favorite anime characters that drops new episodes every Thursday. If you tune in this week, you'll find out who would win between Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist and Alan Walker from D. Greyman.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome week on the Dynamite Network. Definitely check out those shows. Visit dynamicpodcasts.com or click the link in our show notes to listen to all the shows on our network.
Speaking of Senjo World, we heard that it was host Zach's birthday this past week. So we want to give a big happy birthday to the birthday boy. And Zach, if I were to get you a gift from Marvel, I would get you the Muramasa blade, which is Wolverine's sword that he got from Japan that is able to slash him and negate his healing factor. It's badass.
And I would get you Pied Piper's flute, because I know that you're into music and that you have a degree in it. It's very evident in the production of Senjo World, so for a fan of music, you can't get better than that.
Yeah, my Muramasa blade would cut your flute in half, so...
Yeah, try getting past its sonic force field.
All right, happy birthday, Zach. But with that out of the way,
quick to the No Prize. A No Prize is an award Marvel used to give out to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Dual No Prize, is a digital award that we post on Instagram and in our email newsletter for the person that we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week we asked, who would you want to direct a Wonder Woman reboot and why? And this was coming off the news that Gal Gadot was basically saying that she was going to be part of the next Wonder Woman movie production, which may or may not be true. But we wanted your guys' opinions for who should helm the next film if it were to happen
in James Gunn's new DC universe. We got a number of answers. We're going to break down the honorable mentions before revealing this week's No Prize winner. Our first honorable mention goes to Lizzie Dyer Arney, who said,
"Hey, it's Lizzie. I'm going to shock absolutely no one and say I would like Greta Gerwig to direct the Wonder Woman reboot. So Barbie is probably going to be the biggest movie of the year. I think Greta is the hottest thing in Hollywood right now. I think that would be really good to revive DC's brand. I really would like to see what her take on the character would be. Barbie Land is pretty similar to Paradise Island, isn't it? And I think this would be a lot of fun."
Yeah, I figured that this would be most people's answers coming off of the success of Barbie, which has just surpassed The Dark Knight to be Warner Brothers' most successful film domestically ever, which is crazy. Who would have known that Barbie would have been more popular than Batman? Not me.
Well, you have to kind of account for inflation with that. Records will always be broken box office wise because of that. And inflation is crazy right now. But that's not to discount the huge accomplishment that the Barbie film achieved. I haven't seen it yet, though. I haven't really been able to get to the theater with a newborn.
I had a chance to see it, I think the second week it came out. I went to see Oppenheimer before I saw Barbie. I didn't love the film. I think it kind of gets its satirical message mixed up, but that's just me. Greta Gerwig is a good director, though I think I would prefer someone with a little bit more experience with action, personally.
Or you could go the Marvel route where basically they just hire action directors for you to let you nail down the other aspects of the direction.
Yeah, that's what they did with Birds of Prey with Kathy Yan, and I don't know, I think I would prefer one vision for the entire film.
Well, great answer, Lizzie. Our next honorable mention goes to Trevor Myers, who said,
"Hi, my name is Trevor Myers, and the director I would pick for the Wonder Woman reboot would be Kathryn Bigelow, the first woman to ever win the Best Director Oscar. She did that for The Hurt Locker. Since then, she's done Zero Dark 30 and Detroit, all critically acclaimed films. She's also worked in the action genre. In the 90s, she did Point Break. She's done Blue Steel. She's done a bunch of great films. And she also had interest in directing an X-Men movie in the early 90s starring Angela Bassett as Storm, according to The Wrap. So, fun fact.
And that's pretty cool. I didn't actually know that about Kathryn Bigelow. Now, she is a director with a background in action. She's made some awesome military movies. So yeah, she would be a fantastic choice, I think. Though I question whether or not she could direct a film set in the tone of James Gunn and his style, because it would be nice if the DC Universe films had a similar tone, sort of like the Marvel Universe going forward.
Yeah, while the Marvel Studios films are distinctive from each other, there is somewhat of a more cohesive tone among them in that, they're action-driven, visual effects heavy with some comedic elements, It would be nice to get some kind of cohesion there with James Gunn's DCU.
I think that's definitely what people want. As cool as it would be to see Kathryn Bigelow's Wonder Woman, I do think it would be very different from any other DC project. But great answer, Trevor. Our final honorable mention goes to Ken Johnson, who said,
"Hey guys, it's Ken. I too paused the episode right as soon as you guys started to interview me in order to answer this question, because I'm in front of a computer and I could actually really look into it. My pick is Denis Villeneuve, because I think he would be awesome as a Wonder Woman director. Thanks."
That's a creative pronunciation of Denis Villeneuve, which is also probably butchering the pronunciation. If there's any director I would love to see direct a superhero film, it would be Villeneuve. I don't think he ever would, but Ken Johnson gets an honorable mention for the name drop alone.
Yeah, like Kathryn Bigelow, his vision is a very singular, distinct vision. I think he did great on films like Blade Runner 2049 and Dune. He also showed that he can direct strong female leads with emotional centers, like he did with Amy Adams in Arrival, which is a fantastic film. I really like this answer. Again, I do feel like it would be a little bit of a stretch to get him to play within James Gunn's DCU, but it would be an incredible film nonetheless.
We want to give a big shout out to Travis Herndon and Miggy Matanguihan for taking the time to visit our website and record an answer. But the winner of this week's No Prize is Brandon Estergard, who said,
been waiting for this question to be asked for a while now. I think Guillermo del Toro would be perfect for a Wonder Woman reboot. Del Toro is great at bringing these mythological/cryptid creatures to life, and especially using practical effects. I'd set the movie in the underworld and just let Del Toro go nuts.
Guillermo del Toro is a fantastic director, and he's particularly fantastic at creating these magical fantasy creatures. You take a look at films like the Hellboy movies or Pan's Labyrinth, or even his most recent Pinocchio movie, and I absolutely know he has what it takes to bring the mythical world of Wonder Woman to life.
Yeah, not only the mythical part of the film, he can direct action as we saw in Blade 2, and he could direct strong female leads as we saw in The Shape of Water.
Absolutely, yeah. I also love the fact that Brandon brought up the Underworld, because I always thought that would have been a perfect Wonder Woman sequel. Just have her travel to the Underworld to get Steve Trevor's soul back, and sort of like a Orpheus type story that has ties to mythology.
That would have been so much better than Wonder Woman 1984, for sure.
Yeah, Hades could have been the villain. Missed opportunity.
But great answer, Brandon Estergard. You win this week's No Prize. Congrats. If you, the listener, want a shot at winning your own No Prize, stay tuned to later on this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week. But now that that's done, on to the news. All right, so this isn't comic book movie news, but it is news regarding Jonathan and myself. We created a deck building card game, kind of in the vein of Marvel Legendary or the DC deck building card game. If you've heard of those or you're into those, we created a PvP version of that, a player versus player, 2-player card game, where you can fight as the Marvel heroes against DC heroes. And we offered that game exclusively through our store to patrons of this podcast.
Yeah, it's a really fun game, we think. We spent over 10 years making it, and because of all the time we spent doing that, we decided we wanted to offer it to more than just our patrons and really open up the potential for fans of games, not necessarily comics, to enjoy it.
Yeah, it would be nice to sell the Marvel vs. DC card game, but we don't have licenses from Marvel or DC to actually produce this thing and sell it to the public at large. So we rebranded the game from Marvel vs. DC Infinity Crisis to Chronicle AI and based the story of the game around a short story that I created a while back. I'll go ahead and read basically the fictional background of the game to you guys. So, at the twilight of human civilization, humanity created the Path R, a posthumous artificial intelligence for transmitting the human record, robots. Their objective? To communicate mankind's story to whatever sentient life appeared next on Earth. The Path R robots wandered the planet for centuries in search of intelligent beings. Over time, they evolved beyond their programming. They developed their own society, equipped with the entirety of human knowledge, and became the planet's new dominant life form. The robots fostered the developing plant and animal life, transforming the Earth into paradise. After several millennia, new sentience finally appeared in the form of visitors from outer space. These beings, the Xenoi, were also artificial like the Path R robots, programmed to amass resources on behalf of their alien creators. Indifferent to the Path R robots' attempts to relay mankind's history, the more advanced Xenoi began tearing down and harvesting the planet. Seeing their paradise demolished, the Path R robots determined that they would fight to protect their home. No longer emissaries, but defenders, they reconstructed their forms for battle. This is the Chronicle of the AI War for Earth.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I think it plays really well into the gameplay. If you're interested in getting the game, visit dynamicduel.com/AI.
Yeah, check it out. You could download the rule set for free so you can learn how to play. The game comes with 165 cards total, including one Path R robot deck and one Xenoi deck. So we hope you guys check it out. Definitely download the free rulebook. Consider buying the game. And if you do, let us know what you thought about it.
And also don't forget that we do still have a Marvel vs. DC version of the game for our patrons.
But that does it for this shameless plug. But we do have a question of the week that ties in. So here it is.
Who is your favorite robot character from Marvel or DC, and why? Since the card game deals with robots, we figured that this was an appropriate question, and we're really curious to hear your guys' answer.
Record your answer at dynamicduel.com by clicking on the red microphone button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, which will prompt you to leave us a voicemail. Your message could be up to 30 seconds long, and don't forget to leave your name in case we include you on the podcast. We'll pick our favorite answer and award that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to Instagram and our email newsletter. Be sure to answer before August 26th. But now let's go ahead and move on to the main event of this episode, where we review the latest DC film to hit theaters, Blue Beetle.
Alright, Blue Beetle is the latest film to come out from DC Studios. It was directed by Angel Manuel Soto and stars Xolo Maridueña of Cobra Kai fame as the title character. The film was originally supposed to be released as an HBO Max exclusive, but was switched to a theatrical release just before Discovery and Warner Brothers merged and filming began. Depending on who you ask, either this film or the upcoming Superman Legacy is the first film in the new DC universe shepherded by DC Studios co-head James Gunn. This film is produced by Peter Safran, the other co-head of DC Studios, so depending on this film's box office success, I can see this film kicking off the new universe. And it's not a terrible film to kick off said new universe. If people were looking for an MCU tonal approach to the new DC universe, then they'd have a hard time finding a more Marvel-esque film than Blue Beetle, for better or worse. The film and title character borrow quite a bit from Marvel, I'd say. It's funny and action-packed with heartfelt moments and a charismatic lead. If you haven't seen the film yet, I strongly encourage you to see it in theaters if the fun MCU films of the past are your thing. And definitely see it before listening to this spoiler review.
I'm interested in hearing how much you think that this film was inspired by Marvel's films, especially given how much you enjoy it, which makes me think that you just really love Marvel now. If this film is indeed inspired by Marvel's films, I would say it's inspired by the lesser side of Marvel that we don't like to talk about, the side that produced Ant-Man, Quantumania, and Thor: Love and Thunder.
No, I'm thinking more like Iron Man, Black Panther, that kind of thing.
You're out of your fucking mind if you think that this film could compare to those, because it can't. It was a fine effort. I don't think it was exceptional like the first Black Panther or Iron Man films.
Well, I guess this is the first of many times I'll just be saying to you during the course of this review, haters gonna hate. So, Joseph, you got to see this film a day before me. And though you threatened to spoil everything, the only thing you really told me before I saw it was that the film was exactly what I was going to expect it to be. And that's pretty accurate. I haven't read too many Blue Beetle comics, honestly, but I did read the character's title up until about a year after the introduction of Jaime Reyes during DC Comics' Infinite Crisis event. The comic title was known for its humor, action, badass tech design, and unapologetically showing Jaime Reyes' strong cultural Latin upbringing. I was expecting the film to match the comic that made the character fairly popular, and I'm happy to say that it did. The movie is a nearly perfect adaptation of the Blue Beetle comics. As we see in the movie, Jaime Reyes took over the mantle of Blue Beetle from the character Ted Kord as part of a push from DC Comics to create more diverse and relatable characters. Relatability is usually more associated with Marvel characters, as DC's heroes tend to be more aspirational, but part of Jaime's appeal is that it's easy to relate to him and his experiences with his ethnically diverse family. And sure enough, family was a major component of this film, more so than most other superhero movies.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to relate to Jaime, especially if you come from a Latino background.
Which
also
you and I do.
Interesting that you're mentioning how popular this character is due to his relatability, considering that, like you said, it's a trademark of Marvel characters as opposed to DC, which seem to be a little bit more iconic and larger than life and archetypical, not so relatable. So basically, what you're telling me is that you have a essentially Marvel character in an essentially Marvel film and that you loved it, and that you're calling me a hater If this was a Marvel film, honestly, it wouldn't be one of my favorites. I would consider it one of its lesser entries in the MCU.
To which I could only reply, haters gonna
Here it comes.
hate.
All right, we're going to hear that over and over again. Let's get into why you liked it and why I thought it was okay.
Well, I think the biggest appeal of the film to me, and part of the appeal of Jaime Reyes as Blue Beetle in general, is that the character is just so damn cool. I mentioned that he borrows quite a bit from Marvel, and I'd say that if someone described the character as a mixture between Iron Man, Venom, Black Panther, and Miles Morales as Spider-Man, that would be a damn good description. One's cool factor is very subjective, but I describe each of those Marvel characters as cool, and Jaime himself may just be the coolest superhero in existence, in my opinion, particularly on film, as we get to see all of the blue electricity and neon glow, the Buster Swords and the plasma cannons. If this movie came out when I was 9 or 10, I'd have thought it was the best movie that had ever been made, like 5 stars, no question.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it would appeal to 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds. I think you're correct in that the visual effects and the action were probably the best things about this movie. They were mind-blowing, honestly. It's incredible how much better the visual effects were here than in the recent Flash movie.
I was legit terrified that like everything we saw from the trailers was going to be the only good CG in the movie, and that everything else was just going to be complete like uncanny valley weirdness like the Flash was. Thankfully, that was not the case. Now, as an adult, as a Hispanic adult fan in particular, there was a lot to enjoy with this film. I thought the story was fun, the action was awesome, and the humor was decent. You know, it does get juvenile at times, but I describe the humor in the comics the same way. Like, Jaime may not be a juvenile in the movie like he is in the comics, but he's not far off. And for a family film, it's not uncommon to come across jokes like the bug ship's fart spray.
The humor was a little bit cheesier than I would have liked it to have been. Very reminiscent of the style of humor that we'd get in family action movies from the 90s or something like that. You know, very harken back to that time. There were some jokes that definitely landed for me, especially coming from George Lopez, who is a comedic legend. That guy is so funny. And I was really iffy going into the film on what I would think about his character, but he really carried the film outside of the cool action beats and visual effects stuff.
My favorite joke in the whole movie came from him when Jaime was like, "It's inside me." And George Lopez is like, "It went up his ass," but in Spanish.
Yeah. There were a lot of Spanish curse words in this. I was actually surprised that it got away with a PG-13 rating.
Holy shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of the movie that's subtitled from Spanish, those subtitles are not quite accurate as to what's actually being said. I remember towards the end of the film, Jaime's mom essentially says in Spanish, like, "Go kill those motherfuckers." But in the subtitles, it was like, "Go kick their asses." And I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah, that was pretty amusing. I guess I'm a little bit surprised, though, that you found the movie as amusing as you did, considering that you dislike cheesy humor even more than I do. So I just feel like you're just being biased toward this film because it has a DC logo on it.
You know, that's fair to call me out on that because I don't enjoy cheesy humor. I think it was the environment. I went to go see this movie in a theater that I usually don't. It's situated in a largely Hispanic neighborhood, and everyone was just laughing the whole time. And I saw it with my family, who was also Hispanic, and all of them were laughing as well. I couldn't help myself. That may be why I just had such a good time with this movie and the humor.
So what you're saying is you lost all objectivity.
It's really hard in a theater where everyone's laughing not to laugh.
Okay.
I could see where you would say that the humor was juvenile, but again, the comics are juvenile. The comics are always making like inappropriate, like puberty jokes and stuff like that. So it's on brand for the character.
All right.
I also love that you're clutching your pearls at these jokes when you make like jokes about taking a shit like at least twice a week.
I'm just saying that cheese isn't my favorite style of humor.
That's fine. That's fine.
And you're a hypocrite for enjoying the humor in this movie. You wouldn't give any other film that kind of leeway.
To which I could only say, hypocrite's gonna hypocrite. I don't know how else to respond. I enjoyed it. Sue me. One of the things in particular that was interesting to me in this film was how well the filmmakers blended like the humorous family tone with the adult edge. Like, you had scenes like the fart spray, but 30 seconds earlier, you had the bug ship impaling an enemy soldier with one of its legs, which is a little violent. I think the film definitely harkened back to a time when family films were a touch darker, like in the 80s and 90s. Like The Dark Crystal, like The Goonies, like Temple of Doom, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
One non-family film from that era that I think influenced this film in terms of its minuscule amount of body horror and definitely its villain's plan is RoboCop. The stakes are basically the same in that this corporate tech giant run by the world's biggest douche is planning on creating an unstoppable technological security force that will be under its control. The film doesn't do a great job of enforcing the stakes and explaining what will happen if Victoria Cord's plan succeeds. It focuses so much on Jaime's early superhero career that we don't see him save anyone but his family. And that's fine. You know, Jaime has only had the scarab for 2 days in the film, and because his family is such a big part of his life, it makes sense that his personal stakes would be hyper-focused on saving his family. But because it's so hyper-focused, it weakened the primary antagonist.
For sure. One of the biggest gripes I have about this movie is that it feels overly generic. A lot of the things that we saw in this movie we've seen before and done maybe a little bit better, including the family aspect of this movie. You know, I think I said on the Discord that the whole strength in family theme was done incredibly in the Shazam film. And we've also seen more mature, complex takes on the family dynamic in films like Black Panther and Shang-Chi. But I guess the one thing that this film has going for it that those other films don't, that kind of give Blue Beetle its own voice, is the Latino culture aspect. Outside of the action and visual effects, I think that was the film's strongest suit, because it was a lot of fun to watch. Palmera City felt like this wonderful amalgam of like Los Angeles and Miami. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, Palmera City was very well realized, I thought. I don't know if I would agree with you, though, that other superhero films have done the family angle stronger. I think that's sort of confusing conflict with theme. Like, there was still a very strong theme of family here. And just because there was less conflict with the family doesn't mean that it was not strong. Going back to the stakes of the film, usually it doesn't help when the main character can seemingly do anything. Blue Beetle has, like, all of the powers. But I will say that they did a good job prior to the final act, when Blue Beetle and the Scarab Kajira fully bond, of limiting Jaime's control over the suit, which is straight out of the comics and brought some danger to the character earlier in the film.
Yeah, that was fantastic. It's not often that we see a hero unable to control their powers in this way. It was definitely a unique take that I thought was quite fascinating.
It does make me wonder, though, how they're going to proceed with this character in future films now that he's seemingly in full control of his powers and able to do anything. I do feel like if they make a sequel to this, like, the villain is going to have to affect the Scarab in some way so that Jaime loses some control over it, because the dude is OP.
Yeah, he's pretty strong. I could totally see now why the results of the duel episode we had where we pit Blue Beetle against Spider-Man went the way they did.
I still feel kind of bad tricking you into that one, because I knew that Blue Beetle was going to stomp, but we went with it anyway. Now, I mentioned that the film felt very like 90s to me, and maybe some of it had to do with the saturated color palette, but I think most of it was the score. I loved the score for this movie with its synthesizer. It sounded appropriately alien and technological and badass. I thought it was perfect.
Yeah, the auditory landscape for this film was kind of fascinating. The synth made it feel, you know, like early 90s, late 80s. The songs that they chose for the soundtrack were appropriate throwbacks to the same era, both within American culture and Hispanic culture. Even pop culture references like El Chapulín Colorado harken back to decades past, because I feel like I haven't seen that character in ages.
Oh, yeah.
Really
Dude,
cool.
Dad was just cracking up during those scenes, because he used to watch that character as a kid. And there's definitely some similarities between El Chapulín Colorado, which essentially translates to the reddish cricket or the cherry cricket, and Blue Beetle. They're both like a color and a bug. It's kind of amusing. The whole film definitely like spans a broad spectrum of Latin culture. Like you mentioned, even with music, there's everything from reggaeton to like old mariachi songs, Los Pancho songs. It was great to hear.
And maybe a lot of deep cuts too, like the telenovela reference Maria de la Barrio.
Right.
I didn't even know what that was, honestly.
Mom recognized that. She used to watch that at her grandmother's house when she was younger, I guess.
Interesting.
All the cultural references aside, the heart of this film is in its characters, so let's talk about them in the character breakdown. Now, Blue Beetle, aka Jaime Reyes, was played by Xolo Maridueña, and he's perfect as the character. I thought they were going to make him a young high schooler in the movie, but that probably would have felt pretty Cobra Kai, and making him a recent college graduate fit the overall themes of purpose and destiny in the film pretty well.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Xolo Maridueña was born to play this role. He fit the character really well. I'd never really seen him in anything because I never watched Cobra Kai, but the dude is definitely poised to become a big star, I think.
I hope so. Yeah, he deserves it. He's great. He's fantastic. He's essentially the star of Cobra Kai, I would argue. So yeah, he definitely is a star in the making for film.
Yeah, a lot of charisma, hits all the right emotional beats, and is a fantastic fighter, apparently. The fight scenes in this movie were incredible. And I didn't think they would be so hand-to-hand given the nature of Blue Beetle's powers, but they managed to work in Xolo's martial arts skills and really well here, too.
Yeah, seamlessly. It was great. Now, Jaime returns home from college, unsure how to help his struggling family, but feeling a responsibility to do so. He struggles with his purpose, as does his aged father, revealed in a heartfelt scene of encouragement and relatability, though, as his kind father explained to him, whatever happens, at least the family can face it together. That's sort of the central crux of the film. Jaime ends up seemingly in this horrifying situation with the unwanted parasitic and alien scarab attached to him for life, but by the end, he is encouraged by the spirit of his father to embrace the hand that has been dealt to him and make the most of it to be a superhero and save his family. It's a very mature and relatable theme. After all, who among us doesn't question their purpose in life? And I think for many, purpose is found in overcoming hardship and taking responsibility.
Honestly, anything really dealing with Jaime Reyes and the Blue Beetle character in this movie was pretty flawless. I think fans of the character are going to be over the moon with his portrayal here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know I was. Honestly, my hope with how cool the suit and the character's powers are, but also with how relatable the character is with his family, I hope that Blue Beetle will become the favorite superhero of millions of little boys across the planet. And I think he will, particularly in Latin countries. I'm dying to see what this film's worldwide box office take is going to be.
It's not going to be high because it's underperforming, but it might be...
domestically, yes. But what's the worldwide total going to be?
It's probably still going to underperform because it's DC and nobody likes DC. But I do see it maybe becoming like a cult favorite down the line.
Fingers crossed. That would be awesome. Moving on to Jenny Cord. She was played by Bruna Marquezine. And she does a good job as Jenny, even though most of the film I kept asking myself, why is she in the movie? And not because I thought she was an unnecessary character, but because as far as I'm aware, she was created for the film. By the end, I was actually glad they introduced her in the movie, not only because she was a great love interest for Jaime, but also because she became Jaime's connection to Ted and Victoria Cord, and also the one who really understood the stakes of Victoria's plan. Blue Beetle is a legacy character, but the legacy in the film really revolves around Jenny and the Cord name.
I'm actually really glad she was included in this film because I think without her, it would have seemed like the movie was making a statement regarding class and race dynamics where every single Hispanic character is treated as almost like an oppressed second-class person. By having, this like rich, affluent Hispanic person in the film, they were able to avoid that problem.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that, but that's, 100% true. I especially came around on the character of Jenny after I saw the film and saw some speculation amongst our patrons in our Discord chat server that because Jenny is part Brazilian, that could mean her mother is Beatriz da Costa, the superhero known as Fire and a former teammate of Ted Cord on the Justice League. I love that idea, and I want Jenny to inherit her mother's powers in the next film.
But did Fire and Ted Cord's Blue Beetle have a romantic relationship in the comics?
Dude, Fire flirted with everyone. She's Brazilian.
The fuck is that supposed to mean?
Brazilians are like some of the sexiest people on the planet. They know it. We learn a little about Jenny's mother in the film during a scene that really sets up Jenny's emotional arc. She longs for her family and for a family, and she really admires how close Jamie is with his. By the end, she's accepted into the Reyes family, even though she's pretty much responsible for everything bad that happened to them. They didn't seem to see it that way, though, and she definitely helped them recover some of what they lost at the end, specifically their home and Rudy's truck. So that was nice.
Yeah, they kind of looked out there. The early conflict of the movie is that the family is losing their home due to their poverty. And the issue never really gets addressed until that 11th hour scene at the end of the movie where she's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy the house. And the community is going to come together. I thought the community was going to come back to help them rebuild the house, but they just, had a fucking barbecue, which didn't really help anything. So yeah, fortunately Jenny was there.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, the issue didn't really have time to be addressed because the whole film only takes place over the course of, 3 days? So, yeah, I mean, if it took place over a long period of time, things would have played out differently for sure. Moving on to Cesar Rudy Reyes, he's played by George Lopez. He's not one of my favorite comedians. I mean, he's decent. I thought he was going to be just so-so in this film, but like you, I'm actually really glad he was in it because I thought he did a terrific job as Rudy and was responsible for some of the film's most successful humor.
I love George Lopez. I think he's one of the most hilarious comedians ever.
He definitely played the character of Rudy as such a character. He's paranoid about the government and Cord Industries technology. He was a real help to Jaime and everyone, not only in handling technology like the bug ship, but also in inventing his own tech and maximizing his truck Taco, which actually got a lot more laughs than I thought it would. They really milked that thing, but in a good way. I just love hearing George Lopez scream, "Da Taco!" Just his screaming is fantastic. It's just so funny.
It's really good. You're right. He was such a character, they could almost give him his own show.
I just thought George Lopez was going to play him like George Lopez. But I would say this is probably George Lopez's best acting job that I've ever personally seen.
Yeah, I would agree with that, even outside of the comedic bits. The parts where he actually had heart-to-heart talks with Jaime, I thought were really well done.
Yeah, there was a pretty touching scene with Rudy and Jaime on top of the Cord mansion when Rudy describes himself as basically like a loser who sleeps on his brother's living room couch. But when Jaime tells him that he's never seen him like that he's always seen his uncle as this badass, there was just something truly special and loving and empowering, not just about family, but non-judgmental family in particular. And you could see that love in the performances of both Xolo and George Lopez.
Is Rudy from the comics?
No, I don't believe he is. Jaime has an aunt, but I don't think, as far as I'm aware, that we ever see him with an uncle. I mean, Alberto, Milagro, Jaime's mom are in the comics, although his mom has a different name. Her name is Bianca in the comic, and in the movie, her name is Rocio. But yeah, Rudy is an original character.
I was hoping to get some kind of explanation as to who the hell this guy is and why he's so good at building random technology and where that came from. And yeah, he seems like a character that would be rooted in the comics.
I'm sure he will be after this movie. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. Moving on to the rest of Jaime's family, I don't have much to say about each of them. I think the standout is Milagro, his sister. She was played by Belisa Escobedo. I thought she did a great job here, and like George Lopez, brought a lot of humor to the film. Her snarkiness makes her a good foil for both Jaime and Jenny, but in spite of her attitude, you never question her loyalty to her brother or her family.
I thought the father was a standout as well.
Oh, Alberto? He was played by Damien Alcazar.
Yeah, he tied in heavily to the themes of purpose and destiny. It was interesting to see him at the end kind of state that he realized his purpose posthumously was to be there and provide strength for Jaime in his moment of need.
That scene almost broke me in the theater. I didn't cry, but I was really close. That was such a beautiful scene. I don't have too much to say about the mother, but of course, I think one of the standout characters of the film as a whole was Nana, and not necessarily in a positive way for me personally, at least. I have other family members who loved her, but I think the joke of her being like this badass revolutionary who could wield a Gatling gun was beating a dead horse.
Yeah, it should have been given one reference, kind of as like a wink and a nod, and then dropped entirely. I think it would have actually been funnier that way.
Absolutely. Moving on to the villains of the film, Ignacio Carapax was played by Raul Max Trujillo. He was an interesting character, somewhat, but only up until the very end. Like throughout the whole film, he has this weird relationship with Victoria, but he's very stoic and quiet, something of a mystery. And he says mysterious things like, your family makes you weak. So there's this hint of backstory there, which we don't get until the very end, and I honestly felt that was a cop-out. I wish they would have established early on that he suffered from memory loss, and I think that would have made the end make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, the character was too generic for too long of the film to make him any sort of interesting villain. Too much of his character building was done pretty much after the fact. Although it was an interesting story, and it seemed like the film was touching on injustices faced by Latin American countries at the hands of the American military complex.
Right.
But it was kind of like shoehorned in there. Not that the film needed to be about that, but overall, the character building there was just too little too late.
I agree. Essentially, we learn at the very end that Carapax was a little boy living in a rural Latin American country whose mom was the victim of a Accord Industries missile. I don't remember it being clear why his mom was bombed, and I'm not sure if it's entirely necessary. But Victoria essentially abducts Ignacio as a little boy and performs horrendous experiments on him that it takes his arm and implants him with OMAC tech. His entire existence is a testament to Victoria Accord's evilness, essentially. And it was pretty hardcore how he was the one to give her comeuppance at the end by dragging her screaming into the fire and blowing her and himself up. That was crazy.
Is Carapax an OMAC?
In the comics, no. The OMAC is a very different thing in the comics, and I'm still not quite sure how I feel about them using it in this movie. OMAC stands for One Man Army Corps, and it was done really well during Jaime Reyes' debut during the Infinite Crisis storyline, where the OMAC technology was a nanovirus that was implanted in just random people across the planet as like sleeper cells. It was very akin to like Secret Invasion in a way. And of course, it was done very different here. Although I don't think you wouldn't be able to pick that back up in a later film as a different version. In the comics, Carapax got his armor from Pago Island, the same island where the fortress was at the end of this movie. It was an island owned by Jarvis Cord, Ted's uncle, who was the one responsible for Dan Garrett's death, the original Blue Beetle. But speaking of Jarvis Cord, let's move on to Victoria Cord, who is played by Susan Sarandon.
I want to jump in right here and say that this is by far the worst performance I've ever seen Susan Sarandon give. She was horrible in this movie. Good God, this villain sucked.
I feel like you're being a little harsh, but not by much. I mean, Susan Sarandon, she's a great actress. I think she did a decent job with what was called for the character in the script. You know, essentially, she was just supposed to be this corporate elitist and racist who's more concerned with money and her legacy than human lives. She wasn't supposed to be likable. It was a very cold performance, though, especially in contrast to the more colorful cast.
She was so detached from everything. It felt like she was like reading cue cards, and her approach was to be as generic as possible.
I didn't think it was that bad. It was bad, not as bad as you're describing it, though. I think she still emoted. She still acted, you know?
Okay.
Haters gonna hate. We learned that Victoria helped start Accord Industries as a weapons manufacturer with her father, though when her father died, he left the company to Victoria's brother, Ted. It's never made clear whether Victoria had some responsibility in Ted's disappearance, though I'm guessing it had more to do with his adventures as Blue Beetle than her. But regardless, Victoria makes the most of Ted's absence and steers the direction of the company back to the weapons industry with the intent of creating the ultimate cybernetic soldiers. I'm confused, honestly, why they had to create the character of Victoria Cord when she's essentially Jarvis Cord from the comics, as I mentioned earlier. Jarvis isn't a major character, though, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. I'm just wondering why, of all the routes you could have taken with a Blue Beetle villain, they decided to go this route. And again, I think they just wanted to make someone super, super unlikable, like the ultimate entitled Karen.
If Susan Sarandon doesn't get nominated for a Razzie for this role, I'm going to eat my shirt.
You heard it here first, folks. Joseph's going to eat his shirt. In the meantime, let's move on to the story highlights. In a frozen tundra, Cord Industries, led by Victoria Cord, locate an alien artifact known as a scarab within a giant stone sphere. Not long after, we see Jaime Reyes return home to Palmera City after earning a pre-law degree from Gotham Law. he learns that his family is losing their home in the Edge Keys neighborhood after his father lost his job and because Cord Industries' development in the city increased housing prices.
I can't remember if we ever learned how the scarab ended up in that stone.
No, we have no idea. We're not sure if Ted Cord put it there. It was implied that maybe he did and had set up decoys across the entire globe that Victoria Cord was searching through. But I'm not sure if it's explicitly said. There was a lot that was flashing by the screen during the opening credits, so the answer could lie in that.
They were cool opening credits. I like how they kind of give a history of the scarabs and everything.
Yeah, and how lethal they are, just devastating a planet. That was cool. Jaime takes a job with his sister, Milagro, cleaning beachside mansions in order to contribute money to his family. While cleaning the home of Victoria Cord, he witnesses an argument between Victoria and her niece, Jenny, over the one-man Army Corps, or OMAC, weapons project that Cord Industries is working on, and also over the disappearance of Jenny's father, Ted, the former head of Cord Industries. When Jaime stands up for Jenny, Victoria fires him and Milagro, though Jenny promises Jaime to help him get a job at Cord Industries if he visits her there the next day. When Jaime goes to Cord Tower the next day to meet with Jenny, she frantically gives him a small box containing the scarab that she had just stolen from the Cord laboratories, which was studying the scarab in order to extract its alien code. Despite being told by Jenny not to open the box, when Jaime brings it home, he's pressured by his family to do so. The scarab bonds to Jaime's spine, painfully forming a reconfiguring exoskeleton around him and performing a system calibration check that causes him to tear through his family's roof and Palmera City, where his automatic defense system slices a bus in half. The scene where he goes into space, I thought was really well done. I feel like they did a good job capturing the panic that Jaime was feeling in the moment.
Yeah, it was well done. I didn't like how they basically plagiarized the scene from Shazam when he was falling out of the sky and then with his arms up right before he crashed back onto Earth, he stopped an inch off the ground.
It was played a little bit different in the Shazam movie in that it cut to black and stuff like that, but not by much. And yeah, I would say it was ripped off. I did think it was funny with the guys at the bus stop on drugs when they were like, has it kicked in yet? And then once the whole thing with the Blue Beetle happens, they're like, yeah, I think it's kicked in.
That was funny.
When Jaime returns home, he's frightened at the sight of the scarab bound to his spine, and he steals his Uncle Rudy's truck to find Jenny for her help in getting it removed. Jaime finds Jenny on the run from Cord's lethal security force and helps her escape back to his house, where she tells him and his family that the scarab is an ancient parasitic weapon capable of destroying the planet that has chosen to bond with Jaime for some reason. She explains that her father studied the scarab and might know how to get it off, but they would need to get a key from Cord Tower to access his hidden laboratory. Meanwhile, Victoria orders Lieutenant Ignacio Carapax to find Jenny.
Why is it that every DC film wants to portray its lead male star in the nude due to the way their supersuit works? We saw that in The Flash recently.
We did. But we saw a lot more of Barry Allen in The Flash and more of, Ben Affleck as Batman than we did of Jaime. I don't know. I feel like studios always have the hardest time with superhero costumes and the whole just nature of them putting on the suit. They're like, oh, well, obviously the clothes aren't underneath the suit, so they have to take them off, right? It's just, you don't think about that when you're reading comics. With help from Uncle Rudy, Jenny and Jaime manage to steal the watch key, only to then be attacked by Carapax, who is equipped with cybernetic OMAC armor and weaponry. Though Jaime's scarab armor activates defensively in response, Jaime is still unable to fully control his new powers and is nearly killed by Carapax until Uncle Rudy intervenes and the three escape.
I have a question.
Sure.
Why does Victoria Cord even need the scarab if the OMAC armor is already so successful? It nearly defeated Blue Beetle at this point.
I don't know. That's a good question. Initially, I thought that she wanted the scarab for herself. She wanted to bond with it so she could be super powerful. But after I learned that she just wanted the code to make her OMAC machines even more powerful, I was wondering the same thing. I think she's just obsessed with power, and that may not be a very good reason, but I think she's known that the alien technology is far superior than anything Cord Industries could come up with. Moving on to the next scene, at Jenny's childhood home, now a rundown mansion, Jenny unlocks her father's high-tech laboratory, where Jaime and Rudy learn that Ted Cord was the hero once known as Blue Beetle. While Jaime learns more about Jenny's family, Rudy learns via Ted's computer that the scarab, named Kajida, is alien in origin and can't be removed while Jaime is still alive, as evidenced by the scarab's original host, Dan Garrett. Distraught, Jaime goes to the mansion roof, where he sees Victoria Cord's helicopter headed toward his family home in the Edge Keys, and he realizes Victoria knows that he's been helping Jenny. Jaime leaps off the roof in order to activate Kajida through its protective measures, and he flies home.
How do you feel about the movie's treatment of the Blue Beetle legacy here? I thought it was pretty interesting that they brought it up at all, considering maybe they didn't need to.
I actually really liked what they did here. I agree that they probably didn't need to, but I respect them for how they did it. They really didn't miss anything, honestly, and I didn't expect them to touch on as much as they did.
I thought we would just get Ted Cord. The fact that we got so many references to Dan Garrett too, and them acknowledging the fact that he was the first one to bond with the Beetle, I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah, it was really cool. There's so much stuff in this movie that just had me super giddy because I never thought I was ever going to see it. Like the bug ship. Like we saw something very similar in the Watchmen movie because Night Owl is based on Blue Beetle. But to see the actual bug ship was super cool.
Yeah, and that little trapeze thing that comes out of the bottom of it that Blue Beetle swings around on.
Right.
Yeah, there's something special about finally seeing that in live action.
Back to the movie, Victoria uses her private military force to invade the Reyes' home and rounds up its occupants. When Jaime arrives, Victoria orders her troops to attack him and his family in order to see what the scarab is capable of. Though Jaime manages to protect his family, Carapax successfully disables and captures Jaime, while his father Alberto suffers from cardiac arrest during their escape. As Victoria takes Jaime to Pago Island, her private island fortress, Alberto dies, and before the family can grieve, the grandmother and matriarch known as Nana encourages them to save Jaime. This was a pretty intense scene. The fact that Alberto died was incredibly powerful and something I didn't see coming.
I question the legality of Victoria Cord's actions. Like, really, how much can the Reyes family sue Cord Industries for because of all the shit that went down here?
I mean, if they could afford the lawyer...
There isn't a lawyer around that wouldn't take that case. That's a huge payday right there.
Unless Victoria Cord pays them more to not do that.
Well, Jaime took pre-law, so you think he might be able to do a good enough job of it?
Yeah, maybe, if he got his postgraduate law degree and passed the bar to get his license. It would take a lot of work.
Yeah, and then you would never have to work again.
That's fair. Victoria binds Jaime to a machine in a laboratory on Pago Island and begins extracting the scarab's energy and data in order to improve her OMAC machines, a process that nearly kills Jaime. Meanwhile, Jenny takes the Reyes family back to her father's secret lab, where they use the Blue Beetle hovercraft known as the Bug Ship and Blue Beetle's experimental weaponry to travel to Pago Island and rescue Jaime. As the Bug Ship storms the fortress, Jaime's mind drifts into the afterlife, where he meets his father. Alberto encourages his son, telling him that it's not his time to die and that he needs to fully bond mentally with Kajida, which Jaime does just as Jenny and Milagro blow up the fortress's power generators and the scarab code fully downloads into Carapax, amplifying the power of his OMAC armor and driving him into a murderous rampage. I love the joke here where Victoria's scientist, whom she calls Sanchez, when he makes that final stand against her, giving his full name with all of his, family's surnames and everything, it was a great moment. Jaime escapes and finds his family, though Milagro and Jenny haven't returned. Though Jenny is captured by Victoria, Jaime manages to rescue his sister before facing off against Carapax and nearly getting killed. When Jaime is saved thanks to a distraction by Rudy, Jaime believes Carapax kills his uncle and gets a second wind after seemingly witnessing the death of one of his family members. Though Jaime gets the upper hand and nearly kills Carapax, Kajida reveals to Jaime Carapax's memories that it managed to uncover during the data download of how Carapax has been abused by Victoria since he was a child, including being responsible for the death of his mother. After Jenny manages to bring down Victoria's getaway copter, Jaime lets Carapax kill Victoria by overloading his suit and generating an explosion that also destroys all the OMAC weapons held at the fortress. though Jaime and his family escape the explosion in the bug ship, and they finally mourn Alberto's death together. The final battles here were so unbelievably cool. I mentioned how Blue Beetle borrows a lot from Marvel, and I have to say, I'm ecstatic that a DC character finally gets his own hallway fight scene.
Yeah, it was so good. Honestly, if that corridor fight scene doesn't make your nominations list for best DC moment of the year for the Brothers Awards in December, I'll be surprised.
Oh, it absolutely will. I just love how Jaime was just pissed off. He's like, let's go! Just smashing his energy fists together. And the song, I Ain't Going Out Like That by Cypress Hill, is definitely my new fight song. I'm getting into a fight with someone, I'm putting that song on.
The moment leading up to that where Kajida repeats his mother's line in Spanish, it gave me chills. It was really well done, that whole scene.
And it really kind of showed how well the two had bonded by that point, because Jaime was starting to influence the Scarab to the point where the Scarab was starting to speak Spanish.
That's such a neat concept.
Yeah, really cool. Also really cool, that final fight between Carapax and Blue Beetle, where Blue Beetle is busting out Buster Swords and doing flying somersault sword slashes. So unbelievably awesome. I was just so happy in the theater during this final fight. After Alberto's funeral, Jenny takes control of Corda Industries and offers to rebuild the Reyes home while also giving Rudy a new truck, both of which were destroyed earlier. Jaime and Jenny finally kiss before he flies her to her childhood home. In the mid-credits scene, we learn via a broadcast on Ted's lab computer that Ted Cord is still alive. Now, I have to say, the painting of Ted Cord in the mansion looks exactly like Jason Sudeikis. Am I wrong?
I wouldn't say exactly, because it was a very impressionist style painting, so it could literally be anybody.
I mean, it's exactly Jason Sudeikis in an impressionist style, right?
Okay. I don't know where you're getting this Jason Sudeikis thing from.
Well, he's been rumored to be in the film, but obviously that wasn't the case. I don't know if maybe they cut his role. I have no idea whose voice that was at the very end. I don't know if that was supposed to be Ted Cord or maybe even Booster Gold, because they refer to Ted Cord in the third person, right? I'm hoping that Ted Cord kind of got trapped in time alongside Booster, and that this film will segue into the Booster Gold television series. That would be awesome.
I almost feel like Jaime Reyes needs his own Booster Gold, right? Because Ted Cord, Blue Beetle, and Booster Gold were best friends, but now that Ted Cord's legacy has kind of been passed down, it would be nice to have that dynamic still with Jaime and a peer.
I think you could go a number of routes with that. You could go the Peacemaker route, who kind of served as a mentor and partner for Jaime in the comics. But you could also go the Teen Titans route. Maybe even Blue Beetle could appear in the upcoming Batman and Robin film, in a post-credit scene or something like that, as Damian is maybe forming the Teen Titans. Who knows? It could work, I think. I would be surprised if we saw Blue Beetle appear in Peacemaker Season 2. I do think that there's room for two Blue Beetles. I think Ted Cord and Jaime could share the role so that you could have Ted Cord in the Booster Gold series. There is an after-credits scene, but it's nothing. It's just El Chapulín Colorado in a cute claymation form.
Colorado.
It was just El Chapulín Colorado in a cute claymation form.
Yeah, I kind of regret sticking around for that one. I don't think it was worth it.
Dad didn't, though. He loved it. So I loved it. But that does it for the movie. Again, I was really happy with the way it turned out. I thought it was a terrific adaptation of the source material. I honestly can't think of a better way to approach the Blue Beetle comics than what they did in this movie. Overall, with the film's thrilling visual effects action and touching cultural look at family, the film introduces one of the genre's coolest and most relatable superheroes yet, particularly for DC. I'm rating the film 4 out of 5 stars, a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, you said particularly for DC, I think you need that asterisk there in your review. I'm a little bit surprised you're giving it 4 stars and not 3.5 stars, because this is basically the definition of a 3.5 star film. I think, as you stated through the course of your review, you have lost objectivity, and I think you should have your Rotten Tomatoes license revoked.
To which I could only reply, haters gonna hate. And it's, again, like I mentioned, the perfect Blue Beetle movie. But that does it for this review. Let us know what you thought about the movie by writing to us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by visiting us on Instagram or Twitter X. You can find links to all of our accounts by checking out our show notes or visiting our website at dynamicduel.com.
And on our site, you could also find a link to our Patreon page where you could join our Dynamic 2.0 tier and chat with us and fellow listeners, our Fantastic 4 tier, which gets you bonus content each month, our X-Force tier that makes you an executive producer of this podcast, or our newest tier that lets you join our Dynamike Podcast Network. If you can't join Patreon, you can still support the show by signing up for our e-newsletter, also at dynamicduel.com.
Or you could also rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or on our website.
Next week's episode is going to be a duel leading up to our Doom Patrol versus Guardians of the Galaxy team duel episode, which is going to be episode 350. Next week, we are pitting the Doom Patrol member Danny the Street, who, if you've read the books or you've seen the Doom Patrol show, you will know is actually a sentient street. And we're going to pit him against the sentient island of Krakoa. So essentially, it's going to be two locations facing off against each other. And I've not been more terrified for how speculation is going to go in my entire life.
In the words of Rudy, we'll burn that bridge once we get to it.
Yeah. But that does it for this episode. We want to give a big thanks to our executive producers, Ken Johnson,
John Starosky,
Zachary Hepburn,
Dustyn Balcom,
Miggy Matanguihan,
Brandon Estergard,
Nathaniel Wagner,
Levi Yeaton,
Nick Abanto,
Austin Wesolowski,
AJ Dunkerley,
Scott Camacho,
and Adam Speas for helping make this podcast possible. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Up and away!
True believers.
Vamos a patearlos en el culo.